At the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth, the water pushes down with roughly 8 tons on every square inch, enough to crush a steel submarine the way your hand crushes an empty can. The Mariana Trench falls almost 11 kilometers into the dark. Drop Mount Everest into it, and the peak would still sit more than a mile underwater. It is the largest habitat on the planet, and we have seen almost none of it. So it feels obvious that something enormous could still be hiding down there, unseen, waiting. Something is, just never the monster you're picturing. Here is the number that starts every honest version of this story. Humans have laid eyes on something like 1,000th of 1% of the deep sea floor. Put another way, more than 99% of the deep ocean has never been seen by anyone, ever. We have better maps of Mars than of the floor of our own trenches. And when a place that big stays that dark and that empty for that long, the human imagination fills it with teeth. A surviving megalodon cruising the black, a kraken the size of a ship. Whatever it was that made that sound in 1997, the trench becomes a blank space on the map, and we draw dragons on it. So let's actually test the dragons, one at a time, against what the deep will and won't allow. And we test them almost blind. In the more than 60 years since 2 men first touched the bottom of the Challenger Deep in 1960, only a small handful of people have ever followed. For decades, none at all. Until a filmmaker made the descent alone in 2012, and a private expedition began running dives at the end of the 2010s. Most of what we know about the deepest trenches doesn't come from human eyes at all. It comes from landers. Unmanned steel frames, baited with fish, dropped over the side of a ship, left to sink for hours into the black, filming whatever the smell of a meal draws out of it. Almost every creature in this story arrived the same way, swimming into a cone of light with no one standing behind it. That is how thin our view of this place really is. It also helps to be clear about what the deep actually demands, because those demands are the real gatekeepers here. There is no sunlight past the first kilometer, so nothing grows. No plants, no algae, no base to a food chain. Almost all the food is second-hand. Marine snow, the slow fall of dead plankton, and scraps and waste sinking from the sunlit ocean far above, drifting down like grey flakes for weeks before it lands. Add water barely above freezing and pressure that climbs with every meter you descend, and you get a place that punishes size, rewards patience, and starves nearly everyone in it. Whatever monster you want to imagine down there still has to eat. That one requirement quietly kills most of the legends before we even start. Start with the big one, the creature that headlines every trench legend, the megalodon. A shark the length of a school bus, jaws wide enough to swallow a person whole, the largest predatory fish that ever lived. The fantasy says a few of them slipped into the trenches and have been hiding in the dark ever since. It's a great story, and it fails on 2 separate counts. First, the fossils. Megalodon's teeth vanish from the record around 3.5 million years ago, and there is no trace of it after that anywhere in the ocean, at any depth. Second, and this is the part the myth never accounts for, we now know what kind of animal it actually was. Chemical analysis of its teeth shows Megalodon was warm-bodied, running a body temperature well above the surrounding water. That is enormously expensive. A warm-blooded giant that size needs a constant flood of high-energy prey, whales, big fish, the crowded, sunlit, productive waters near the surface. The trench offers the exact opposite, near freezing cold and almost nothing to eat. A megalodon in the Mariana Trench would starve and freeze in the dark, long before it found a single meal. It isn't hiding down there. It couldn't survive down there even if it were still alive. Fine, you might say, But the ocean does hide real giants, and it does. This is where the kraken comes in, and the kraken, unlike megalodon, is genuinely real. The giant squid stretches to something like 12 or 13 meters, with its feeding tentacles extended. Its cousin, the colossal squid, is heavier still, the largest invertebrate on Earth, up to around half a ton, with eyes the size of soccer balls, the biggest eyes of any animal that has ever lived, built to gather the faintest scraps of light in the deep. These are real monsters by any reasonable definition. But notice where they actually live. They hunt in the open middle water, roughly a few hundred to 2,000 meters down, deep, but nowhere near the trench floor. They drift in the water column, not in the crushing hadal bottom. And here's the quiet detail that undoes the hiding part of the legend. We've found them. A live giant squid was photographed in its own world in 2004 and filmed a few years later. The colossal squid, more elusive still, was captured on video alive for the very first time in 2025. And even then, it was a juvenile, barely 30 centimeters long, glimpsed after decades in which the only colossal squid anyone ever saw were dead adults dragged up on fishing lines. The largest invertebrates on the planet turned out not to be unfindable. They were just deep. Depth alone, it turns out, is not the same thing as a hiding place. So the two headline monsters are out. But the trenches are still full of animals that look like they crawled straight out of a sailor's nightmare. And some of them are almost unbelievably old. Take the frilled shark, a long, eel-bodied thing with a mouthful of nearly 300 needle-fine teeth arranged in curved rows, each one shaped like a tiny trident to hook soft prey and never let go. It looks like a sea serpent, because in a sense, it is one. Its lineage runs back tens of millions of years, which is why people keep calling it a living fossil. Or the goblin shark, pale pink and slack until the instant it feeds, when its entire jaw fires forward out of its face like a spring-loaded trap to snatch prey. A slingshot bite on a body plan whose ancestry reaches back around 125 million years. These are exactly the kind of creatures the trench myth wants. Ancient, strange, predatory. But look at where they stop. The frilled shark rarely ventures past about 1,500 meters. The goblin shark keeps to similar depths, maybe a bit deeper. Both of them live in the deep sea, yes, but they live in the upper deep, thousands of meters above the true trench floor. The pattern is already starting to show itself. Old and frightening does not mean bottom dweller. The deep has layers, and almost everything we've met so far quits long before the bottom. Now we get to the one creature that actually earns the word lurking, down past where the sharks give up. In the water of the trenches themselves, there is a squid unlike anything else in the ocean, and we barely know it exists. It's called the bigfin squid, and almost everything about it is wrong in the best way. Its arms don't hang the way a squid's arms should. They stretch out sideways from the body and then bend sharply, like elbows, before trailing away into impossibly thin filaments that drift far below it, a squid on stilts or on strings. From the bend to the tips, those arms are estimated to reach as much as 8 meters, and by some accounts far longer, though no one can be sure. And that uncertainty is the whole point. No adult bigfin squid has ever been caught. Every single thing we know about it comes from a handful of chance encounters caught on deep-sea cameras. A few dozen sightings in the entire history of ocean exploration. One was filmed in the Philippine Trench, more than 6 kilometers down, which makes it the deepest squid ever recorded. This is the real trench animal, the genuine article, and it is almost nothing like the myth. It doesn't lunge or attack. It hangs in the black, silent and ghostly. letting those thread-like arms fish the water for whatever tiny prey drifts into them. The most monstrous-looking thing in the deepest water is also one of the most delicate. And the deeper you go, the more the whole idea of a monster starts to fall apart. Consider the deepest octopus ever found. In 2020, a camera lowered into the Java Trench recorded a small, pale octopus flapping a pair of fins that stick out above its eyes like ears. A Dumbo octopus, named for exactly the reason you'd guess. It was drifting at nearly 7,000 meters, roughly 1.5 kilometers deeper than any octopus had ever been reliably seen before. It was not terrifying. It was, honestly, endearing. A soft, slow, almost gentle animal, paddling through the most hostile water on the planet as if it were nothing. That is what the true deep tends to produce. Not fangs, patience. There is real size down there, though, just not where or how the legends promise. The deep sea plays a strange trick on certain animals, blowing them up far larger than their shallow relatives. And no one is entirely sure why cold, pressure, and a scavenging lifestyle push bodies in that direction. The giant isopod is the clearest example. Picture the little grey woodlouse that curls up under a damp log in your garden. Then imagine one the length of your forearm, armoured in overlapping plates, crawling across the deep seabed. That's a giant isopod, the same basic body as a pill bug, scaled up to nearly 0.5 meter, feeding on whatever dead thing sinks down from above. Stranger still is the supergiant amphipod. Amphipods are usually the tiny shrimp-like specks that flick around a rock pool, a few millimeters long. In the deep, one of them has become a scavenger, the size of a small loaf of bread, around 34 centimeters, swarming up out of the dark whenever a carcass falls, and living down to around 7,000 meters. For a long time, we assume something that big and that deep must be rare. It isn't. Recent work suggests this one animal may roam across a huge fraction of the world's oceans, everywhere and unseen at once. The deep isn't hiding one monster. It's quietly full of oversized scavengers we've only just started to count. Then there are the fish, and the fish are where this story turns. The deepest one ever filmed is not a fanged horror. It's a snailfish, a small, pale, almost translucent thing, no scales, no menace, its body soft and faintly glowing in the lander's light. In 2022, off Japan, a camera recorded one swimming at 8,336 meters, the deepest a fish has ever been seen. Others of its kind have been hauled up alive from just past 8,000. They thrive where nothing with a backbone has any right to be, in water that would flatten almost anything else. Their bodies don't fight the pressure so much as surrender to it. Soft, gelatinous, watery flesh with no air pockets to be crushed and no heavy scales to haul around. What little they hunt, they take from the same scavenger swarms we just met, snapping up amphipods that gather wherever something dead has fallen. A fish so fragile you could tear it apart with your fingers, flourishing 8 kilometers down, is its own quiet kind of impossible. And you'd assume, naturally, that fish like these just keep going all the way down, that the trench floor, 11 kilometers deep, must have its own fish, its own predators, its own hidden food chain. It doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is the single most important fact in this entire story. Fish have a hard limit. Somewhere around 8,200 meters, they simply stop. And the stopping isn't random, it's chemistry. To keep their bodies from being crushed at depth, deep-sea fish load their cells with a molecule called TMAO, which braces their proteins against the pressure and keeps them working. The deeper the fish lives, the more of it they need. but you can't add it forever. Around 8,200 meters, a fish would need so much of the stuff that the inside of its body would become as salty as the sea around it. And at that point, the whole system fails. Water floods in, the balance collapses. The trick that let them survive the depths becomes the thing that kills them. That's the ceiling. And it isn't just a limit for one kind of fish. It's a limit for all of them, which means it's a limit for every animal with a backbone. No fish below roughly 8,200 meters means no sharks down there and no whales, and therefore no possible megalodon and no possible sea serpent. The deepest 2 to 3 kilometers of the ocean are, by the laws of biochemistry, a zone where no large vertebrate can exist at all. The monster everyone's been searching for isn't missing, it's forbidden. So who actually rules the very bottom, below the fish line, in the deepest trenches on Earth? The answer is stranger than any sea serpent. The dominant life on parts of the deepest trench floor isn't a predator, or even, really, an animal in the way you'd think. It's the xenophyophore, a single-celled organism that grows to the size of your fist, 10 to 20 centimeters across. One of the largest individual cells known to exist. They've been found in the Mariana Trench more than 10,000 meters down, scattered across the sediment in the thousands, sifting food from the mud. Sit with that for a second. Go deep enough, past the point where fish can follow, and the giants you find are giant amoebas. The masters of the last frontier are grapefruit-sized blobs of protoplasm, quietly carpeting a floor no eye had ever seen until a few years ago. But there's a darker discovery waiting at the bottom, and it isn't a creature at all. We assumed the trenches were pristine, too deep, too remote, too far from us to be touched. They aren't. When scientists began pulling those supergiant amphipods up from the hadal deep and looking inside them, they found our fingerprints already there. Fibers of plastic and traces of industrial pollutants, the kind of long-lived chemicals we banned decades ago, lodged in the bodies of animals in the deepest place on the planet, including the very bottom of the Challenger Deep. It happens because those scavengers live off marine snow, the endless drift of particles sinking from the surface, and our waste sinks with it. They eat the fallout of the entire ocean above them, and lately that fallout carries us. We have not yet named most of the species living in the trenches. We have already contaminated them. The frontier was polluted before it was explored. So put the whole picture together and answer the question honestly. Is something still lurking in the ocean's deepest trenches? Yes, genuinely, and in numbers we can't estimate. Nearly every serious expedition into the hadal zone comes back with animals no one has ever described, creatures still without names. On some trips, the tally of unknown species runs into the dozens from a single expedition. New amphipods, new snailfish, new worms and sea cucumbers and things without obvious relatives, pulled from the mud faster than anyone can formally name them. The trench absolutely is hiding life, constantly, right now. But it is not hiding the things the legends promised. The megalodon is extinct, and even if it weren't, physically could not survive there. The kraken is real, but lives higher up, and we filmed it. And the bloop, that infamous 1997 sound that half the internet still insists was some colossal unknown beast calling in the deep, was traced by scientists to the noise of a giant iceberg cracking apart far to the south. Not an animal, ice. Every giant we went looking for turned out to be extinct, relocated, or imaginary. What the trench actually holds is stranger and quieter than the monster we wanted. A squid on thread-like stilts that no one has ever held. An octopus with ears, drifting alone through crushing dark. Scavengers the size of bread loaves swarming a dead fish in water that would kill us instantly. Giant single cells ruling a floor that sees no light. and an invisible chemical wall 8,200 meters down that closes the deepest realms to anything with a spine. Which brings it back to that first cone of light pushing into the blackness. A single lamp on a lander, falling for hours through water that gets colder and heavier the deeper it sinks, until it finally settles on the floor and switches on. For a moment, you see it. A patch of pale sediment, an amphipod flickering past, a snailfish hovering at the edge of the beam. And then you notice the thing that matters most. It isn't what's inside the light. It's the enormity of what stays outside it. Kilometers of dark in every direction, an entire living world we've barely brushed. And drifting through that beam, past a creature science hasn't gotten around to naming yet, a single thread of plastic. Something is definitely still down there. It just isn't waiting to eat us. It's waiting to be found. And we're arriving in the wrong order, leaving our mark on the deep before we've even learned what lives in it.